I was working in the store. I may have told you about the store. Hilltop Food Market, 220 Hoover Avenue, Bloomfield, New Jersey, Pilgrim 39878. I had that memorized from the time I was a little kid. When people ask me, Ken, when did your work career begin? I know the exact date. May 1st, 1956, the day that I turned 6 years old. My dad put me on the schedule to work in the store. And I worked in that store every single day of my life growing up. Sweeping the floor, putting sawdust down by the butcher blocks, scraping the butcher blocks with the wire brushes, waiting on customers, stocking the shelves. When I got a little older, using the deli machine, and then learning how to bone out a chuck, take all the bones out of a great big side of beef so that my father could slice steaks and make chopped meat from that great big piece of beef. Now, one day, I was working in the store when Karolcia came in. Now, I'm sure this woman Karolcia had a last name, but, well, when you have a beautifully euphonious name like Karolcia, it's like Madonna, Cher, Prince. She was just Karolcia. Now, Karolcia only spoke Polish. Our store was the epicenter of a Polish immigrant community. In the late 1800s, right through the 1900s, Polish people came to this area where they built their homes, and then they built the Polish church right across the street from the store, and then they built the rectory for the Polish priests right across the street from the store, and then they built the convent for the Polish nuns right down the street from the store, and then the parochial school across the street from the store. So a lot of these Polish people came into our store, and as a result, I had to know a little bit of Polish. So I learned some phrases. I co więcej, pani, to wszystko. I learned how to greet them. Dzień dobry, pani, jak się masz? And to send them on their way. Dziękuję, pan, do widzenia. A few phrases. And other than that, I knew that milk was mleko. I knew that ham was shenke. I knew that pickles were ogórki. Chleb, bread, onions, cebula, papierosy, cigarettes, things like that. So I could manage. But with Karolcia, no. She only spoke Polish, and she would only speak to my mother and father, who were fluent. They were bilingual. Now, Karolcia, when she came into the store, we treated her with respect, deference. She carried herself with a kind of nobility, dignity. And truth be told, she had a job of importance in our community. You see, she was the housekeeper for the priests. She kept that rectory meticulously, spotlessly clean, and she did all of their cooking, cleaning, laundry. So she had an important job, and she showed it in her bearing. Now, on this day, my dad took care of her, put all of her groceries in a great big brown grocery bag, and then he called to me, Kenny, come here, take these groceries for Karolcia, follow her, and she's going to give you a job to do. A job? What kind of job? She'll tell you. She'll tell me. How could she tell me? She only spoke Polish. I wanted to ask my dad, but I knew I couldn't. My dad worked from 7 o'clock in the morning till late at night, and he was always busy, and he didn't like to stop to have to explain things. If I ever pressed him on a subject, he would stop and say, now listen, there are only 2 ways of doing anything. The right way and the wrong way. Now, go and do it the right way. And he would leave it to me to figure out which was the right way. So I followed Karolcia, carrying her groceries. We went to the back door of the rectory. where she turned and took the groceries from me. She was not going to let me take one step into the rectory with my dirty kids. No, no. And then she motioned me to sit down on the porch steps. So I sat down and I waited. She came back out, placed in my lap a great big white ceramic bowl. She handed me a metal grater. And then she handed me a great big root of fresh kshan. And then she pointed to them, and I knew what to do. This was not a job I was looking forward to. The root of kshan, horseradish, she had just purchased from my dad, and I was to grate that horseradish. Not a great job. But what could I do? I began grating that horseradish. Now, it didn't take a minute before my eyes began to water and then to stream down my cheeks. I continued to grate, wiping my eyes on my t-shirt sleeves. It didn't take another minute before my nose began to run. And so now I was grating that horseradish, wiping my eyes, wiping my nose, and grating the horseradish, and wiping my eyes, and wiping my nose, and grating the horseradish. And now, if you've never grated a fresh horseradish root, you don't know what I'm talking about. This is not like that horseradish you buy in the store, no, mixed with vinegar and maybe a little salt and sugar. No. This stuff is so strong that you could practically see the fumes rising. So now I'm like, I've got to get this job done fast, and I'm grating and grating and grating and wiping and grating and grating and grating and wiping and grating and wiping and grating and wiping, and I'm down to that little nub and grating and grating and shakref cholera ty diabu. That's how my father cursed in Polish. Not much of a curse. Shakref translates to dog's blood. A cholera translates to cholera. Cholera was such a bad disease that it became a profanity, and ty diabu means the devil. I had grated my thumb. Now this was not the first injury that this thumb encountered at the store. I may have told you about the time that I sliced a tiny sliver of it off on the deli machine, the cold cut slicing machine, when I was too young and not allowed to use it. But that's another story. Well, I looked at my thumb. Oh man, it stung. And then I looked down and a little tiny drop of my precious blood sat atop of that mountain of white grated horseradish. Karolcia's gonna kill me. And I could hear my father's voice. There are only two ways of doing anything, the right way and the wrong way. Do it the right way. Oh man, this was not the right way. I had an idea. I took that little nub of horseradish root that was left and I threw it in the bushes. I took my left hand and I deftly scooped out a little bit of that horseradish just below that drop of red, and I threw that into the bushes. I took my thumb and I wiped it onto my dungarees. We didn't have jeans back in the day. No. We wore dungarees. I wiped my thumb on my dungarees. I tucked my thumb under my fingers, knocked on the door. Karolcia came out, looked at the horseradish, gave me a nickel tip. I ran across the street, got a Band-Aid for my thumb, went back into the store where I bagged some potatoes and waited on customers. So if you ever see me and I seem to be lost in a trance, in some kind of a twilight zone, and I'm mumbling to myself, and I'm rubbing this thumb and this finger together, well, I am in a kind of a twilight zone trance. I'm back in the early 1960s. I'm in the store with my mom, my dad, my siblings. Pani Truba, Pan Wojciech, Pani Stybułkowski, Pan Gutkowski, and all those Polish immigrants. I'm at Hilltop Food Market, 220 Hoover Avenue, Bloomfield, New Jersey, Pilgrim 39878. The store.